Have you ever wondered what happens behind the scenes of the royal family? What if I told you that one of the youngest members, Prince Louis, who's always been the cheeky heartthrob of the monarchy, is now at the center of a deeply personal crisis? This is a story that's never been told before, the real struggles of a young prince, far beyond the polished images the world sees. And trust me, the truth will surprise you. In the aftermath of King Charles's coronation, the Princess of Wales and her family began an unexpected but heartfelt effort to reconnect with the communities across the United Kingdom. Their decision to take part in these engagements was more than a royal duty. It was an attempt to offer something more personal and direct. This outreach, which also involved their children, marked a significant and poignant milestone, especially for young Prince Louis. This event at first seemed like yet another royal gesture, another duty on the long list of royal appearances. However, the royal palace had initially tried to keep this moment quiet, maintaining the illusion of perfection. But as soon as the truth slipped out, the careful facade the palace had built began to crack open, and the reality behind the glittering image became inescapably visible. Behind the shimmering balconies, the perfectly curated ceremonies, and the smiles that had become almost symbolic of the monarchy, something troubling was unfolding in silence. At the heart of it was the youngest member of the royal family, Prince Louis, once considered the mischievous, cheeky spark of joy in the royal household. For years, the public had known him as the playful and energetic little boy whose antics made royal appearances all the more memorable. From his adorable balcony waves to his sassy smiles, Louis had become a beloved figure for many. However, just as the world had come to understand him as this energetic, carefree child, it was now clear that something had changed in the heart of the palace, something darker that no one could ignore. The weekend, which had promised to be full of royal charm, brought with it not just Prince Louis's characteristic antics, but also a much more unsettling truth. Beneath the polished events and charming moments, a storm had quietly started to brew, one that involved the youngest prince in ways the public had not yet understood. The same little boy who once stole every spotlight with his cheeky grins and playful waves was now at the center of a much more serious and deeply concerning situation, one that the palace could no longer keep hidden behind the veneer of royal appearances. For years, Prince Louis had been seen as the spark of joy within the royal family. He was the child whose boundless energy made formal ceremonies feel less stiff, whose laughter had the power to bring warmth to even the coldest of royal walls. His playful antics often turned serious state affairs into viral moments, and his innocent smiles had a way of reminding the public that the monarchy, with all its grandeur, still had room for youthful joy. But then, almost imperceptibly at first, something began to change, and it was a change that no one, not even the palace, could ignore. What started as whispered concerns inside the royal household grew slowly but steadily, transforming into a situation that could no longer remain in the shadows. Then, the palace issued an unusually rare and personal statement, one that broke from the usual royal tradition of careful detachment. The statement revealed that Prince Louis, the youngest son of Prince William and Princess Catherine, was experiencing an emotional crisis so profound that it had begun to affect the very heart of the royal family. This was not a matter of scheduling conflicts or ceremonial adjustments. This was something far more personal, something that spoke to the vulnerability of the young prince. The wording of the palace's statement was careful, painfully careful. Every sentence seemed to tread lightly, as if the palace was walking a delicate tightrope between revealing too much and not revealing enough. Yet beneath the surface of this restrained language, there was an unmistakable tone of urgency. This was not just another royal update that the public had grown accustomed to. This was different. This was a moment of rare transparency, a crack in the palace's wall of silence. For an institution so famous for its secrecy, its tightly controlled messaging, and its strict protection of the children within its walls, this was unprecedented. Personal struggles were not something the monarchy usually acknowledged publicly. Vulnerability in particular was a luxury the royal family had never afforded itself. But now that wall had cracked, and the world could see what had been hidden behind the palace's stoic exterior. The statement made one thing abundantly clear: the well-being of Prince Louis had become the royal family's most pressing priority. It was no longer about title, ease, traditions, or the centuries-old protocols that governed every royal engagement. The focus had shifted. Everything else, including royal engagements and public appearances, had taken a backseat to the emotional state of a young boy who, until recently, had appeared to be the happiest child in the royal family. This revelation struck the public with an emotional weight that no one had anticipated. It was not just the fact that Prince Louis was struggling, it was the fact that the palace had openly acknowledged it. Royal commentators, journalists, and observers immediately understood the significance of this admission. The palace's statements are almost always filtered through layers of advisors, polished until they barely reveal anything of substance. Yet this statement carried something different. There was a quiet force behind every word, and outside Buckingham Palace, reporters gathered within moments. Cameras lined the gates, microphones raised in anticipation, and the public felt the gravity of the situation. The absence of dramatic language, combined with the palace's openness, only deepened the sense that something was seriously amiss. Silence from the monarchy is usually meant as a form of protection, but public silence, combined with an unusual admission of distress, suggested that something had already gone terribly wrong behind the closed doors of the palace. For years, Prince Louis had been a symbol of youthful joy and innocence within the royal family. His playful moments had turned public events into a reflection of the lighter side of the monarchy. However, when the palace acknowledged his emotional struggles, the contrast was striking. The once lively child whose antics had charmed the world was now facing a challenge that no one had seen coming. The difference between the joyful image of the prince the public adored and the quiet suffering he was enduring behind closed doors was stark and painful. Social media, which often ignites a firestorm of speculation whenever the royal family is involved, reacted differently this time. Instead of the usual gossip and accusations, there was an outpouring of genuine concern. The world seemed to understand the gravity of the situation. Questions replaced rumors, and empathy replaced criticism. Even royal commentators, who typically scrutinize every word and gesture of the family, seemed hesitant to push further. There was something deeply personal about the situation, a reminder that despite their royal titles, members of the royal family are still human beings. They too face the same emotional struggles and challenges that any family might experience. Then, in an unexpected twist, the next voice to address the situation was not a spokesperson from the palace. It was Prince William himself. This moment would change everything. Instead of standing behind a podium surrounded by advisors as would be expected of a future king, William spoke directly to the public with a sincerity that was almost jarring. What the world saw was not a royal announcement, it was a father speaking about the emotional well-being of his son. Prince William explained that Louis had been struggling with emotional distress for months. There had been subtle signs, restless nights, irregular sleep, moments of laughter followed by unexplained sadness. At first, these were easy to overlook. Life inside the royal family is constantly in motion, filled with travel, public appearances, and endless changes in routine. Children adapt, or so it seems, but the signs in Louis began to form a disturbing pattern that could no longer be ignored. Mood swings, long silences, and moments of confusion, things that felt too heavy for a child so young. William admitted that as a parent, he had initially underestimated the seriousness of his son's condition, but then one simple question from his son shattered everything. In a quiet, intimate moment, Prince Louis asked his father something so profoundly simple that it stopped William in his tracks. "Will my mother disappear too?" That question, spoken in the stillness of their home, away from the prying eyes of the public, pierced the carefully constructed bubble of royal life. For a child growing up in the constant glare of the public eye, life could feel much less stable than it appeared. The grand walls of the palace, the formal ceremonies, the pomp and circumstance, those things meant little to a child trying to make sense of the world around him. What Prince William realized in that moment was that his son's distress wasn't about change, it was about fear. Fear of losing the people he loved, fear of losing the stability he had always known. And that fear had grown quietly inside Louis for months, only to manifest in that one heartbreaking question. For a child of Louis's age, emotions can be overwhelming. What might seem like small disruptions to adults can feel like monumental shifts to a child, especially when that child is living under the microscope of the royal spotlight. Louis, once so full of life, had begun retreating into silence. He spent his days watching the world around him without engaging in the way he once had. The absence of misbehavior was perhaps the most troubling sign. He wasn't throwing tantrums, he wasn't acting out. Instead, he was withdrawing inward, silently processing a world he didn't fully understand. For William and Catherine, this silence was more unsettling than any outburst could have been. Silence, they knew, often hides fears that children are too young to articulate. As the days went by, they began noticing the subtle signs more acutely. Louis seemed distant during family conversations, lost in long pauses when questions were asked. Nights were filled with restlessness as he lay awake, staring into the dark, his mind consumed by worries too complex for a child to voice. It became clear that Louis was not just dealing with a phase, he was struggling with deep, emotional fears. He was afraid of change, afraid of losing the world he knew, and the world he had come to rely on. Prince William, a father in the most extraordinary of circumstances, chose to step away from the palace protocol and speak directly about his son's struggles. He made a decision that surprised many. He put his family's needs first, ahead of the royal expectations and public duties. Instead of hiding behind centuries of tradition, William spoke candidly about his son's emotional crisis. His message was simple. He asked for understanding, for patience, and most importantly, for space. A space for his son to heal, away from the relentless glare of public scrutiny. It was an extraordinary request, coming from a family so accustomed to being in the public eye. But in that moment, William showed that his son's well-being mattered more than any royal title or legacy. Behind the palace walls, the focus shifted. Experts were consulted, family time was prioritized, and Louis's public appearances became fewer and more carefully managed. The goal was not to shield him from the world forever, but to give him the space and time he needed to heal, to process his emotions, and to feel safe again. Because in the end, beneath the grandeur of the monarchy, beneath the centuries of tradition, there was one truth that would always remain: children are fragile. They do not care about crowns, titles, or history. They care about feeling safe, understood, and loved. And for Prince Louis, that journey back to emotional comfort had become the most important mission inside the royal household. As the world watched and waited, hoping for the young prince's peace, one truth became clear: even the most famous family on earth cannot escape the realities of childhood. Behind the grand ceremonies, the gilded balconies, and the polished royal image, there was still a young boy trying to navigate emotions that were too big for him to understand. Prince William's message reminded the world that sometimes true strength is not found in standing tall in front of the cameras. Sometimes strength lies in stepping away from them, choosing protection over performance, love over legacy, and most importantly, choosing the safety and well-being of those you love. In that quiet decision, the royal family revealed something more human than any ceremony could ever show. This story was never about royal drama or palace intrigue. It was about a father recognizing his son's fears and making a choice that no tradition, no protocol, and no crown would ever take precedence over. And as the world watched with compassion, one undeniable truth echoed far beyond the palace walls. Even within the grandest of castles, childhood still needs protection, love, and care. This is where the story takes a profound turn. Prince William, stripped of all royal formality, chose family over tradition. He chose transparency over perfection. And in doing so, he invited the world into a very personal, emotional journey, one that many royal families would never dare share. If you believe in the importance of putting family first, of choosing compassion over reputation, share this story. Let the world know that even behind the golden gates of Buckingham Palace, love, fear, and vulnerability are the threads that hold a family together. Click below to subscribe and be the first to hear more untold stories about the royal family's most private moments. Join the conversation and stay with us as we continue to uncover the human side of royalty, because this is a story about far more than just crowns.